So this program that it anticipates, the tax credit program, would allow these scholarships to be founded entirely by private money. No public money whatsoever would be used to create these scholarships, and that's a critical distinction in Missouri. I've provided to everybody, I believe, a copy of the testimony that I offered on this issue in front of the Missouri General Assembly last month, and I spell out kind of the details and the constitutional issues that are involved. But to kind of present it simply, Missouri has some unusual constitutional limitations that would prevent the state from adopting a voucher program along the lines of the McKay program. Under the McKay program, you have money going directly from the state to private schools once they've been chosen by parents. So with Missouri, we have a provision called the Blaine Amendment that was passed. It really, honestly, it was an anti-Catholic measure that was adopted in the late 1800s as a way to prevent Catholics from using any sort of public money to educate their children at a time when the public schools were unabashedly Protestant in character. So the Catholics had been going to state legislatures all over the country and saying, look, we can't send our children to these schools to be taught Protestant doctrine. Why don't you give us part of the school funds and we'll just set up our own schools and educate our kids that way? So at the time there was a strong anti-immigrant nativist sentiment in the country, and there was a nationwide push to pass these constitutional amendments that would not allow Catholics to use public money. So that's kind of the history of these amendments. In time, it came to be understood that this applied generally to any religious organization in states that had these Blaine amendments. Now, other states, not Missouri, have looked at these Blaine amendments and they've said, really, the reasoning behind this is not at all what we're talking about when we're applying public education funds to parents, and they get to direct where the funds go. So, for example, in Wisconsin and in other states, they've said that a direct voucher would be permissible. In Missouri, however, there's been a lot of case law on this issue, and it does not appear right now that a direct voucher would ever be possible unless there was a constitutional amendment. However, since we're dealing with purely private money with a tuition tax credit scholarship, the same concerns are not raised. In other words, if you're not pulling money from the state treasury, if it's all a matter of private money, then there's no state action that would present a constitutional problem. So we're very confident that a tuition tax credit program would be permissible under the Missouri Constitution. So I'll be happy to answer any other questions that people have later on, but that's just kind of a general overview of why we're confident that this will be a legal program in the state.
Dr. Hardman, can you speak to the issue of the most significant challenges that will impede these special need programs from being as effective as possible? What's getting in the way?
What's getting in the way in some instances is misconceptions about what will and will not happen. Some of the myths that were out there that we fought whenever we first started doing this was the concept that the private sector would take the creamings, would only take the easiest to deal with. And I think, did you put the McKay report in their packages?
Yes.
Okay. I think if you look at that McKay report, what you'll find is that's not true, and it never has been. This is a report from the Department of Education that comes out on a quarterly basis, and it shows you that we are, in the private sector, actually taking more poor children or lower income children based on the ones who would be eligible for lunches, almost 50%, than the private school is taking. We're taking, if you look at the types of disabilities ranging from the 251s to 253s, and if you're looking at the types of disabilities in terms of learning disabled, autistic, all the different types that we list, we pretty well mirror what is happening in the public school. The most significant group of children in the public school are the SLD kids. The most significant group in the private sector is the SLD, or the K scholarship is SLD kids. So the idea that we would cream didn't pan out. And so I think that's one of the myths. You have to get rid of some of these myths. That it's costing the public school to have these children leave them is not true. In particular with your tax credit, it will not be true at all. But in our particular case, we're actually saving this taxpayers a large amount of monies, because whether you use the tax credit or whether you use the other, in Florida, for instance, we don't take any federal money in the McKay Scholarship. So that's about, with the group that we had last year, that left about $10 million from federal money into the state coffers that could be used by the public school ESE programs that we're not going across. There's no other monies that we don't take. Another issue, when you talk about the financial, is most of the public schools are crowded. In Florida, we have a cap on the number of children. You have to have an average of 25 students, no more than 25 students. And each classroom seat costs you somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. When you move 40,000 children out of the public school, that frees up those seats that don't have to be built. So there's a lot of financial return that comes to a district by allowing a child to get to the place to have an appropriate education. I think some of it boils down to allowing and getting a mindset around the accountability issues, that you cannot put the same accountability factor on the public sector that you do the private sector, or you mess up. And regulations that are in the public sector are not necessarily germane to the private sector, and vice versa. The other issue is timing. The private school's timing is different from the public school's timing. So when you start looking at these factors, you have to look at the private school has to have different timing for their things than the public might have. By now, I know what my fall enrollment is. Most public schools don't know what their fall enrollment is until the door opens in the fall. So the way we set up everything is quite different. So timing is a big issue when you start trying to work partnerships with the state and the local or private. Another issue we found that came up was, we found that we're in the private sector, we're used to dealing with parents every day and their concerns and what they have. Since we moved this to the Department of Education level, we found that the Department of Education doesn't know how to deal with parents of children. It was an alien type of concept.